The lights on the bridge of Earth Defense Fleet's patrol ship Ranger dimmed red as another energy wave hit them. Captain Jack Reed grabbed his chair's armrests, his knuckles turning white. He had seen many strange things during his 15 years in space, but nothing like this. The alien ship ahead of them looked wrong in every way. Its surface was perfectly smooth, forming exact geometric patterns that hurt the eyes if you looked at them too long. No random elements, no artistic choices, just pure mathematical precision. "Sir, they're scanning us again," said Bill, his sensor officer. Sweat ran down the young man's face as he worked his console. "These aren't normal scans. They're trying to predict our movement patterns." Jack nodded, watching the massive vessel. When they had first spotted it near Jupiter's orbit, he had followed first contact protocols. Standard greetings on all frequencies, peaceful approach vectors, everything by the book. The alien ship's response had been bizarre, a demand that they cease their chaotic behavior. "What's our status?" Jack asked, keeping his voice steady for his crew's sake. Mary, his second-in-command, checked her tablet. Engines running at 73% efficiency instead of the usual random fluctuations between 65% and 80%. Life support is cycling at exact 60-second intervals. Even our heart rates are synchronizing, sir. Whatever they're doing, they're forcing patterns on us. The alien ship had called themselves the Orderly, and in the 3 hours since first contact, they had made their intentions clear. They saw humanity's embrace of randomness and chaos as a disease that needed curing. Every transmission from them expressed horror at how humans allowed uncertainty in their lives. "Sir," Bill's shout drew everyone's attention. "They're powering up something big. Energy readings they're perfect sine waves, no variation at all." A beam of pure white light shot from the alien vessel, missing the Ranger by meters. Jack had dodged on instinct, but something felt wrong about the miss. The beam had been too precise, too calculated. "They're not trying to hit us," Jack realized, his eyes widening. "They're hurting us. Each shot is meant to limit our possible escape routes. They're trying to make our movements predictable." As if confirming his words, 2 more beams fired, boxing the Ranger into a smaller area of space. The ship's computer began reporting decreased variation in all systems. Their movements were becoming more mechanical, more ordered. Jack thought quickly. 15 years of experience had taught him that space was chaos incarnate. You couldn't survive out here by being predictable. When a micrometeoroid storm hit, random evasive patterns kept you alive. When a solar flare disrupted your systems, it was human adaptability that saved the day. "New plan," he announced, his mind racing. "Disengage the pattern buffers on the engines, shut down the stabilization systems, ready emergency thrusters." Mary looked at him like he was crazy. "Sir, that'll make our movements completely random. We could spin out of control." "Exactly." Jack smiled grimly. "They want order. Let's show them why humans embrace chaos." The crew worked quickly, disabling the very systems designed to keep their flight smooth and predictable. The Ranger began to shudder and shake. Warning lights flashed as the ship's movement became erratic. The alien vessel's next attack missed completely. Their perfectly calculated shots couldn't track the Ranger's chaotic course. The massive ship tried to adjust, its surface rippling with mathematical patterns, but every new calculation failed to predict where the human vessel would be next. "Send a message to Earth," Jack ordered. "Tell them we've made first contact, and we're dealing with something unprecedented. The aliens aren't hostile exactly, but they're definitely not friendly. They're obsessed with order and want to impose it on us. And most importantly, tell them our chaos is our strength." As the message was sent, Jack watched the alien ship struggle to deal with their random movements. He could almost feel their frustration through space. Humanity's unpredictability, the very thing the Orderly saw as a flaw, had just saved their lives. The alien vessel finally backed off, maintaining a safe distance. Their next transmission was filled with what seemed like confusion. Your behavior defies harmonization. You embrace uncertainty. This requires analysis. Jack knew this wasn't over. The orderly would be back, probably with more ships and stronger technology. But humanity would be ready. After all, chaos had always been their natural state, their comfort zone. And now, it was their best defense against a universe that demanded order. 3 weeks after Captain Reed's encounter, strange things began happening on Earth. It started small, weather forecasts being exactly right, down to the second. Traffic lights changing at perfectly timed intervals. Even lottery numbers following clear mathematical sequences that people could predict. The orderly had returned, not with weapons, but with something far more subtle. They called it the Harmonization Protocol, and they deployed it through invisible fields that wrapped around Earth's major cities like invisible nets. In New York, John watched from his apartment window as the usual chaos of city life began to change. Taxi drivers now moved in perfect lines. No honking, no cutting each other off. Pedestrians walked in organized groups, their footsteps falling in sync. Even the pigeons in the park arranged themselves in geometric patterns. "This isn't right," he muttered, turning away from the window. As a city bus driver, he had always loved the unpredictable nature of his job. Every day brought new challenges, new routes, new faces. But now, he picked up 2 dice from his table and rolled them. 6 and 6. He rolled again. 6 and 6. Again and again. Always the same numbers. The randomness was gone. At the National Weather Service, Mary Thompson stared at her monitors in disbelief. The weather patterns had become perfect spirals and straight lines. Storms formed in exact intervals. Rain fell in precise patterns, and temperatures changed by exact degrees at specific times. "Look at this," she called to her colleague, pointing at the screen. "It's like the weather is following a script. No chaos theory, no butterfly effect. Just pure mathematics." The changes spread across the globe. Factories reported machinery running at exactly 100% efficiency, never varying by even a decimal. Children's playground games became predictable routines. Even the stock market started following perfect mathematical progressions. The orderly ships hung in orbit, visible as bright, geometric shapes in the night sky. Their message was clear. They were fixing humanity's chaotic nature. Each day, more probability fields activated, forcing order onto an increasingly larger portion of human life. But humans, being humans, didn't just accept this new order. In his bus, John deliberately took wrong turns, fighting against the invisible force that tried to keep him on the predicted route. His hands shook with effort, but he managed to introduce tiny bits of chaos back into the system. Other drivers saw what he was doing and followed suit, creating small pockets of unpredictability in the otherwise perfectly ordered traffic. At the weather station, Mary discovered something fascinating. When she let her mind wander, thinking random thoughts, the weather patterns near her sensors showed tiny fluctuations. It was as if human consciousness itself generated chaos that could disrupt the orderly's probability fields. Underground groups formed, calling themselves chaos agents. They met in basements and abandoned buildings, deliberately doing unpredictable things. They played cards with incomplete decks, created abstract art, and danced without rhythm. Each act of randomness seemed to weaken the probability fields, if only slightly. The orderly noticed these disruptions. Their ships pulsed with bright geometric patterns, and the probability fields intensified. More cities fell under perfect order. But wherever humans gathered, tiny sparks of chaos persisted. In his apartment, John found himself hosting secret meetings of bus drivers, taxi drivers, and delivery workers. They shared stories of small victories, moments when they broke free from the predicted patterns. "They don't understand us," John told the group one evening. "They think chaos is a flaw, but it's what makes us human. It's how we create, how we adapt, how we survive." A woman named Alice, a former jazz musician, nodded. My grandfather used to say that the best music comes from the spaces between the notes. Maybe our strength isn't in our order or our chaos, but in how we dance between them. As the day ended, the orderly ships continued their silent watch, and their probability field hummed with mathematical precision. But throughout the city, throughout the world, humans kept finding ways to be unpredictable. They shared knowing looks when they passed each other on the streets, small smiles that said, "They haven't beaten us yet." Because what the orderly didn't understand was that humans didn't just tolerate chaos. They needed it. It was written into their DNA, woven into their souls, and no amount of mathematical perfection could change that fundamental truth. The laboratory was quiet except for the soft hum of machines and the random tapping of Dr. Anna Wells's pen against her desk. She had been staring at her brain scan results for hours, and something wasn't adding up. The patterns she saw weren't just unusual, they were impossible. The orderly's probability fields should have forced every process into perfect mathematical order, including human brain activity. But these scans showed something different. Human brains were still producing chaos patterns, tiny sparks of randomness that shouldn't exist anymore. She rolled her chair to another screen, comparing readings from different test subjects. Bus drivers, artists, musicians, office workers, all showed the same thing. Their brains were fighting back against the imposed order, generating their own chaos. A knock at the door made her jump. Tom Black, a military commander who had been working with the underground resistance, stepped into the lab. His normally crisp uniform was wrinkled, showing signs of the effort it took to deviate from the orderly's patterns. "Please tell me you found something useful," he said, closing the door behind him. "We lost 3 more cities today. The probability fields are getting stronger." Anna pointed to her screens. "Look at these patterns. The orderly's fields can control our actions, our environment, even our machines, but they can't fully control our thoughts. Our brains naturally generate chaos. It's how we dream, how we imagine, how we create." Tom leaned closer, squinting at the complex graphs. "Can we use this?" "I think so." Anna pulled up another set of readings. When enough people gather and deliberately think random thoughts, it creates disruptions in the probability fields, like static in a radio signal. The resistance groups were right. Chaos is contagious. She demonstrated by thinking about random images: purple elephants dancing in space, backwards flowing waterfalls, impossible geometric shapes. The sensors near her workstation flickered, their readings becoming erratic. Tom watched with growing excitement. How many people would we need to break their control completely? Thousands, at least, all thinking chaos together. Anna ran some quick calculations, but we'd need a way to coordinate everyone without the orderly noticing. They're watching all our normal communication channels. A small smile crossed Tom's face. Maybe we don't need normal channels. The resistance has been using old ham radios, Morse code, even passing notes hand to hand. The more random and outdated the method, the harder it is for them to track. Over the next few days, they spread the word. The resistance grew stronger as people learned they could fight back with their minds. They organized chaos gatherings, disguised as regular meetings, book clubs where people read random pages, dance classes with no music, art sessions where people painted with their eyes closed. The orderly noticed something was wrong. Their ships moved more frequently in the sky, their perfect patterns showing signs of disturbance. The probability fields fluctuated, struggling to maintain control. In her lab, Anna made another discovery. The chaos generated by human brains wasn't just random. It was creative chaos. The same kind that drove evolution, that sparked new ideas, that helped life adapt and grow. The orderly's perfect order was like a photograph, beautiful but frozen. Human chaos was like a garden, messy but alive and growing. She shared her findings with resistance cells across the city. People started carrying small devices she designed, chaos meters, that showed them when their thoughts were successfully disrupting the probability fields. Children turned out to be especially good at it, their natural imagination and creativity causing major disruptions in the orderly systems. Tom organized the resistance into waves. When one group got tired, another would take over, maintaining a constant stream of chaotic thought. Street artists painted random patterns on walls. Musicians played discordant notes. Writers wrote stories with no plot. Each act of creative chaos added to the disruption. The orderly responded by intensifying their fields, but this only made their weakness more obvious. Their systems couldn't adapt to change. They could only try to force stronger patterns. But humans kept finding new ways to be unpredictable. As the sun set over the city, Anna looked at her latest readings with hope. The probability fields were showing more and more gaps. Humanity's natural chaos was proving stronger than the orderly's artificial order. They just needed to keep pushing, keep thinking, keep creating. Because sometimes the best way to fight back isn't with weapons or violence, but with the simple, unstoppable power of human imagination. The old military bunker was a perfect hiding place for the Resistance's main base. Its thick concrete walls naturally disrupted the orderly's probability fields, and the random maze of corridors confused their scanning systems. Commander Tom Black stood in the command center, surrounded by screens showing data from around the world. What he saw gave him hope. Cities that the orderly had harmonized weeks ago were showing cracks in their perfect patterns. Human chaos was bleeding through, causing ripples in their carefully controlled systems. But what really caught his attention was the data from their own archives. "Look at this," he said, pointing to a screen as Dr. Anna Wells entered the room. "We've been so focused on fighting them, we never stopped to ask why they're doing this." Anna leaned in, reading the reports they'd gathered from the orderly's transmissions. Her eyes widened. They've done this before, to other species. The records showed a pattern. The orderly traveled from world to world, finding civilizations they deemed too chaotic. They would impose their probability fields, force order on these societies, and then nothing. Every species they helped eventually stopped developing. No new inventions, no cultural changes, no progress at all. They're not trying to destroy us, Tom realized. They think they're saving us. But their perfect order is like a cage. It stops evolution, stops growth. Just then, Captain Jack Reed rushed into the room. After his first encounter with the orderly, he'd been helping coordinate Earth's space defense. "We've got movement," he reported. "Their ships are changing position. Something big is happening." The screen showed the orderly's fleet rearranging itself into new geometric patterns. More ships were arriving, each one perfectly identical to the others. They were forming a massive shape in orbit, like a giant mathematical equation written in starships. In cities around the world, the probability field suddenly intensified. The Resistance's chaos meters went crazy, showing readings stronger than ever before. People who had been successfully fighting the fields found themselves struggling to maintain random thoughts. But something unexpected happened. Instead of falling into perfect order, human societies began adapting in new ways. Street artists who couldn't paint randomly started creating art that looked ordered but contained hidden patterns of chaos. Musicians unable to play random notes composed pieces that sounded structured but carried secret rhythms of disorder. "They're learning," Anna said, watching the data pour in. "Humans aren't just resisting the order. They're finding ways to hide chaos inside it, like hiding messages in code." Tom studied the reports from different resistance cells. People were discovering that while big, obvious acts of chaos were being suppressed, tiny, subtle bits of randomness could slip through. A slightly crooked smile, a small skip in a step, a barely noticeable variation in routine. These small acts of defiance added up. The orderly noticed too. Their transmission showed increasing signs of confusion. Their perfect mathematical models couldn't account for this new behavior. Humans were technically following their ordered patterns, but somehow still maintaining their unpredictability. In the bunker's lab, Anna made another breakthrough. "They're ships," she said, pointing to new sensor readings. "They're not just enforcing order. They're feeding on it. They need it. That's why they keep doing this to different species. They're addicted to order. This revelation changed everything. The orderly weren't invincible overlords. They were dependent on the very thing they were trying to impose. And humans, with their natural ability to generate and hide chaos, were literally starving them of their food source. "We don't need to beat them," Tom said, understanding dawning on his face. "We just need to keep being human, keep thinking, keep creating, keep hiding our chaos in plain sight." The resistance shifted its strategy. Instead of fighting the probability fields directly, they taught people how to work within them while maintaining their inner chaos. It was like a global game of hide and seek, with humanity's unpredictability playing a cosmic game of cat and mouse with the orderly's perfect patterns. As night fell over the bunker, the screen showed the orderly ships still hanging in their perfect formation. But now the humans watching them saw something different. Not an unstoppable force, but a rigid system that couldn't handle the wonderful messiness of real life. The war wasn't over, but for the first time, they could see a path to victory. Not through force, but through the simple, stubborn persistence of human nature. The giant screen in the bunker's command center blinked with urgent red warnings. The orderly ships had changed their formation again, but this time it was different. Instead of their usual geometric patterns, they had formed a perfect sphere around Earth, with a massive device at its center. "They're calling it the Pattern Enforcer," Anna said, her voice tense as she read the incoming data. "It's like nothing we've seen before. The energy readings are off the charts." Tom and Jack stood beside her, watching as the device began to pulse with a strange rhythmic light. The orderly's transmission came through, their mechanical voices filled with what almost sounded like pride. "Your resistance has proven interesting, but futile," the message stated. "The Pattern Enforcer will permanently align your reality with proper mathematical order. Your chaos will be eliminated at its source." The device activated with a flash that lit up the sky like a second sun. Around the world, the probability fields didn't just strengthen, they changed. People found themselves unable to even think about being random. Every movement, every thought tried to follow perfect mathematical patterns. In New York, John the bus driver felt his hands lock onto the steering wheel, his route becoming absolutely perfect. In the weather station, Mary watched as every cloud in the sky formed into exact geometric shapes. Even the trees began growing in straight lines. But in the resistance bunker, something strange happened. As the Pattern Enforcer's wave hit them, Anna's chaos meters didn't show the expected readings. Instead, they sparked and fizzed, showing impossible numbers. "This isn't right," Anna muttered, checking and rechecking her equipment. "The readings, it's like the device is trying to enforce patterns that can't exist in our universe." She rushed to her lab, grabbing random objects, a coffee cup, a pencil, a rubber ball. She dropped them, and instead of falling in the perfect arc the orderly's field should have caused, they moved in broken, jerky patterns. "The laws of physics," she said, eyes wide with realization. "They're trying to override them, but they can't. Not completely. Reality itself is fighting back." Tom grabbed the radio, broadcasting to all resistance cells still able to receive. "Everyone, listen. The Pattern Enforcer isn't just affecting our minds or our actions. It's trying to rewrite the basic rules of the universe. But it's failing." Around the world, people began noticing the same thing. The more the orderly tried to impose perfect order, the more the fabric of reality seemed to rebel. Quantum particles, which naturally existed in states of chaos and probability, began causing visible effects in the macro world. The orderly responded by increasing the device's power. The sphere of ships tightened, channeling more energy into the Pattern Enforcer. But this only made things worse. Plants grew in impossible shapes, defying not just chaos but the very laws of nature. Water flowed uphill, trying to follow their imposed patterns, but breaking reality in the process. In the bunker's lab, Anna worked frantically, surrounded by screens showing data from around the world. "They don't understand," she said, almost laughing. "Chaos isn't just part of human nature. It's part of the universe itself. The quantum realm, the space between atoms, the very building blocks of reality. They all need chaos to function." Jack watched as the orderly ships began showing signs of strain. Their perfect formations wavered as reality itself buckled under their imposed order. They're so focused on making everything perfect, they're breaking the rules that hold the universe together. The pattern enforcer's light began to flicker. Where it tried to enforce perfect patterns, the universe responded with even more chaos. Quantum fluctuations became visible to the naked eye, creating patches of probability fog where anything could happen. Tom gathered his team. "This is our chance. Their weapon isn't just failing, it's backfiring. Every attempt to impose perfect order is creating more chaos than before. We need to push back now, while they're vulnerable." Around the world, the resistance mobilized. But this time, they didn't fight against the patterns. They embraced the quantum chaos that the orderly's own weapon had unleashed. As reality itself joined the rebellion, humans found themselves surfing waves of probability, riding the chaos that was woven into the very fabric of existence. The pattern enforcer, the ultimate weapon of order, had ironically become the key to humanity's freedom. In trying to eliminate chaos completely, the orderly had only proven why it was so essential. The resistance launched Operation Chaos Storm just before dawn. As the orderly's pattern enforcer continued to malfunction, creating patches of quantum chaos around the planet, humans had discovered they could use this disruption to their advantage. Anna's lab had become the center of their counterattack. Screens showed the status of resistance cells worldwide, each group ready to strike in their own unique way. "Remember," she broadcast to all teams, "we're not fighting order with chaos anymore. We're fighting perfect order with natural order." The plan was beautiful in its simplicity. Instead of trying to break the orderly's patterns, they would feed them too many patterns at once, overload them with complexity until their systems couldn't cope. It started with music. In every city, musicians played different songs simultaneously. Classical, jazz, rock, folk, each with their own rhythm, their own mathematics. The overlapping patterns created waves of complexity that the orderly systems tried desperately to process. Then came the dancers. In parks and streets, people moved to their own beats, each dance adding another layer of patterns. The orderly's probability fields tried to force them into sync, but failed as each dancer followed their own internal rhythm. John led a convoy of buses, each driving at a different speed, but all following perfectly legitimate traffic patterns. None of them were breaking the rules, but together they created a highway ballet that defied prediction. In her weather station, Mary and her team released thousands of small drones into the sky. Each one followed a different but mathematically perfect flight path, creating a swarm of competing patterns that the orderly couldn't ignore. The alien ships above began to show signs of distress. Their perfect sphere wobbled as their systems tried to analyze and control the exponentially growing number of patterns below. The pattern enforcer's light flickered erratically, its attempts to impose order now creating more complexity instead. "Look at their ships," Jack said, watching from the bunker's command center. "They can't handle it. They're so used to forcing everything into single, simple patterns that multiple valid patterns are overwhelming them." He was right. The orderly's vessels started breaking formation, their surfaces rippling with confused calculations. Each human activity below was technically ordered, following music, following traffic rules, following flight paths. But together, they created a tapestry of complexity that broke the orderly's ability to process it all. Tom coordinated the next phase. Around the world, people began sharing stories, but not just any stories. They shared paradoxes, riddles, and thought experiments. The ship of Theseus, the grandfather paradox, Schrödinger's cat, ideas that could be logically true and false at the same time. The orderly's communication systems went haywire trying to categorize and control these patterns of thought. Their probability fields, designed to enforce single, perfect solutions, couldn't handle ideas that were simultaneously ordered and chaotic. Anna's monitors showed the pattern enforcer's power fluctuating wildly. "It's working," she shouted over the general command channel. "Their systems are trying to process too many valid patterns at once. They can't tell which order to enforce because we're giving them nothing but order. Just too many kinds at once." The quantum chaos patches in the sky began to spread, but not randomly. They followed their own strange patterns, creating fractals of probability that grew more complex by the second. The orderly ships tried to maintain their positions, but found themselves caught in a web of overlapping mathematical truths. In cities worldwide, people added to the overwhelming complexity. Children played games with ever-changing but logical rules. Artists created paintings that were simultaneously abstract and geometric. Writers wrote stories that followed multiple coherent plotlines at once. None of these actions were truly chaotic. They all followed patterns and rules. But together, they demonstrated something the orderly had never understood: that real order wasn't about enforcing a single pattern, but about allowing multiple patterns to coexist and interact. The pattern enforcer's light began to strobe frantically, its programming unable to determine which of the countless valid patterns it should enforce. The device was built to create perfect order, but humanity was showing it a kind of order it had never encountered: the ordered chaos of a living, thinking, creating species. As the sun rose higher, the orderly's perfect sphere of ships began to break apart. Their systems, overwhelmed by the complexity of real life, could no longer maintain their rigid control. Humanity hadn't fought chaos with chaos. They had fought oversimplified order with the true complexity of existence. The orderly's retreat began not with a bang, but with a moment of silence. Their ships, overwhelmed by humanity's demonstration of complex order, hung motionless in the sky. The pattern enforcer's light faded to a dim glow, then winked out completely. In the resistance bunker, Anna, Tom, and Jack watched the monitors as probability fields around the world began to collapse. Natural randomness returned to weather patterns, traffic flows, and human behavior. But something was different. The orderly ships weren't leaving. "They're trying to communicate," Jack said, as new signals appeared on their screens. The mechanical precision of the orderly's previous messages was gone, replaced by something almost hesitant. "We do not understand." The transmission began. "Your patterns, they follow rules, yet create complexity. They are ordered, yet unpredictable. How is this possible?" Tom looked at Anna, who nodded and stepped forward to respond. "That's what life is," she transmitted back. "Real order isn't about forcing everything into a single pattern. It's about finding balance between order and chaos, between structure and freedom." The orderly ships shifted position, forming a new pattern, but this time it wasn't perfectly geometric. There were subtle variations, tiny imperfections that would have been unthinkable before. "We have visited thousands of worlds," they responded. "We have brought harmony to countless species, but none has shown us this kind of order within chaos. We require more information." Around the world, humans began to recover from the effects of the probability fields. John parked his bus and watched as traffic returned to its normal, messy flow. But he noticed how even in the chaos, there were patterns. Mary observed from her weather station as storms returned to their natural state, following both chaos theory and mathematical models. The orderly's next transmission surprised everyone. "We request permission to learn." In the bunker, the team looked at each other. This wasn't the outcome any of them had expected. Tom pressed the transmit button. "What exactly are you asking?" "Our society has pursued perfect order for millennia." The orderly replied. "We believed it was the only path to advancement. But your species has shown us something new. You thrive not despite your chaos, but because of how you balance it with order. We wish to understand this." Over the next few days, a strange exchange began. The orderly ships remained in orbit, but now they observed rather than tried to control. They watched as humans demonstrated how creativity emerged from the combination of rules and randomness, how innovation came from challenging patterns rather than enforcing them. Artists showed them how following strict rules of composition could create wildly different masterpieces. Musicians demonstrated how mathematical progressions could birth endless varieties of songs. Scientists explained how chaos theory revealed the deep patterns within apparent randomness. The orderly learned about evolution, about how random mutations combined with natural selection created ordered complexity. They studied human games, fascinated by how simple rules could create unlimited possibilities. They began to understand that their own pursuit of perfect order had actually been limiting their growth. A month after their retreat, the orderly made their final transmission before departing Earth's orbit. "We came to your world believing we would save you from chaos. Instead, you have saved us from the prison of perfect order. Our civilization will need time to process this new understanding. We will return, not as controllers, but as students of complexity." As their ships disappeared into deep space, their formation was different from their arrival. It still followed mathematical principles, but now included deliberate variations, embracing the beauty of controlled imperfection. In the bunker's command center, now being converted back to a regular military facility, Anna made one final entry in her research log. "The universe," she wrote, "isn't a choice between chaos and order. It's an endless dance between them." The orderly sought to eliminate chaos because they feared it. Humanity embraced it, learned to work with it, and proved that the greatest strength comes not from enforcing a single pattern, but from understanding how patterns and chaos work together. Outside, life returned to normal, or as normal as human life ever was. Traffic lights still created order in traffic, but drivers still found creative ways through jams. Weather forecasts gave structure to planning, but clouds still formed unpredictable shapes. And humans continued doing what they did best: creating, innovating, and finding their own unique balance between chaos and order. The greatest victory wasn't that humanity had fought off an alien invasion. It was that they had taught their would-be conquerors a fundamental truth about existence itself. Perfect order is a dead end, but the dance between order and chaos is where life truly blooms.